Hello and welcome. My name is Karen. I'm a product marketer at Atlassian, and I will be your host for today. So I want to thank you for joining us at the last Forge Roadmap webinar of 2022. Today, we're going to be hearing from a group of Forge product managers who will take us through some of the recently shipped features in Forge, and we'll take a preview of everything that is coming soon. Before we begin, just a few details. We're coming to you live today, and it will be an interactive presentation. You'll have a chance to ask questions throughout. You can just drop that question in the Zoom Q&A widget, and we'll add it to the list and take those questions at the end. There might be a few questions that require a little bit more research to properly answer. So if we don't get to your question live, you can always follow up with us in the developer community, and we'll address it afterwards. So let's take a look at today's agenda. For today's State of Atlassian, we have Colin Chauvet joining us. He is head of engineering for Developer Platform. He's going to be doing a special segment on Forge reliability, including a deep dive into how the engineering team tests and supports performance and uptime on Forge, plus a few ways that we're investing in making this even better. Of course, this is a roadmap webinar, so we'll spend the rest of our time covering the Forge roadmap and answering your questions. Our agenda today includes updates on a few very highly requested features like multi-user app ownership and improvements to the Forge runtime and UI flexibility, so definitely stick around for that. One additional announcement, I want to give a quick shout out to everyone who participated in Codegeist. We saw so many incredible Forge apps that were submitted during the hackathon. And of course, special congratulations to our 3 first place winners. Those were Flowdingo, AI Doctor for Jira, and Reflex. Those submissions particularly went above and beyond in a field of very impressive apps, so well done. We invite you to check out the full list of winners on the developer blog, and we will share that link in the chat. When it comes to the timelines that we'll be talking about today, the presentation reflects our current investments in Forge. Please note that these are forward-looking statements and features and timelines are subject to change. And with that, I am pleased to introduce our first speaker, Colin Chauvet.
Hey everybody, thanks Karen. I'm Colin Chauvet, the head of engineering for the Atlassian ecosystem platform. And for this Forge webinar, we wanted to start off with something a little bit different. Usually we start with the product perspective, but I'm here to represent the Atlassian engineering org. And in particular, to talk about some of the less visible work that goes into running a developer platform like Forge. Now I say invisible because ideally you never need to think about what Forge is doing to run your app. We want deploying an app to Forge to feel almost like a magical experience. It just works out of the box. But as engineers, we all know that creating that kind of magical experience actually takes a lot of work. And you might have heard the analogy of a duck gliding through the water effortlessly. But if you look underneath the surface, it's padding like crazy. And that's sometimes what it feels like to run a huge platform at scale. And while no ducks were involved in the making of Forge, there are hundreds of Atlassian working on making sure our infrastructure runs smoothly behind the scenes. I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes or so talking about some of the recent work in our department to make reliability part of the fabric of our team culture. I also want to share a bit of a deep dive into the Forge infrastructure to help developers understand some of the moving pieces and how Forge actually works under the hood. And then lastly, I'll share a few examples of how we've identified and made improvements to make sure you can trust that your apps are in good hands. So let's start with who we are. The ecosystem engineering team is made up of hundreds of individuals across many disciplines, but today I just want to highlight a few people to put a face to these individuals. Let's start with Daniel. Daniel has been an engineer on the team for over 4 years, and he's one of the founding fathers of Forge. And he has been involved in building most of our backend stack. Mike has been on the team for 8 years and is known as our front-end guru. I have yet to hear a question about iframes he cannot answer, and he also has a mighty beard. And lastly, Christoph has also been on the team for 8 years, and he is the go-to person when it comes to integrating Forge with Jira. And of course, there are many more engineers like those three who work hard every day to make Forge the best platform to build your apps on. When the number of incidents starts to rise, it's never a people problem. It's always a process problem. And this is the way we approach reliability and operational excellence. If we see an increase in incidents, it isn't the result of an individual or a group of individuals, and that means that it needs to be addressed on a policy and process level. And we know this is important because we think about the responsibility of our developer platform every day. We know that our marketplace partners depend on the stability and reliability of our services to provide a living for their employees and their families. Every second of downtime counts. And we are well aware that we bear the responsibility of making sure that our partners can build stable futures on our platform. Now, with that in mind, we've been doing several things to keep platform reliability high and to push it even higher in the future. In addition to a new system for classifying incidents, which we spoke about during the last webinar, we have designated 3 focus areas to strengthen our commitment to maintaining a stable platform. First, slow down on delivery to focus on platform maturity. 2, dedicate significant portions of team roadmaps to focus exclusively on reliability-based initiatives. And 3, hold teams accountable to a very high bar of operational excellence. I want to share a recent example from a reliability blitz that took place over several weeks. Our organization is structured so that teams own capabilities end-to-end, from operational work to feature documentation. Each team within ecosystem platform tracks the health and performance of a set of capabilities they own. Over the last few months, our teams have performed an audit of every capability across every team. And as a result, we have ensured that every one of them has the appropriate service level indicator, SLI, with a corresponding service level objective, SLO. So as an example that you can see on the screen, the app code execution capability includes a reliability SLI with a 99.9% SLO. And this is critically important because when an SLO fails, an incident is raised and teams are paid to investigate and fix. We now feel confident that we have the monitoring systems in place to resolve more incidents before partners are even aware that there is a problem. On top of our reactive mechanism, we are also increasing focus on proactive approaches. Our teams meet weekly to review reports outlining error rates, vulnerabilities, and post-incident review actions. The teams use this information to inform any corrective action in order to prevent future incidents from occurring. Leadership and senior leadership review the outcome of these discussions in order to ensure teams are supported and have the correct resourcing. And lastly, teams have an increased mandate to dedicate a portion of their roadmap each quarter to focus on reliability-based initiatives. Now, a platform like Forge abstracts away a lot of the complexity of app architecture. If you go to the next slide, please, Karen. And that's one of the big value prop of Forge. Developer can just build, deploy, and go. But that also means that sometimes Forge can feel a bit like a black box. And so if you're one of the engineers on this call who's familiar with running your own large-scale cloud infrastructure, you might wonder how Forge is actually put together and what services we're running. Well, Forge is like a hub where many services intersect. Product API, app lifecycle, runtime, storage, UI components, and more. Understanding how Forge works as a platform can help demystify what you're working with as a partner and how we, as an engineering team, test and maintain these systems to be sure they're operationally ready. Now, as developers, you mostly interact with the Forge platform through the developer console and the Forge CLI, but that's just the tip of the Forge iceberg. To explain what all these other components do, we'll walk through an example of a Forge app that extends Jira. So when you create an app and deploy it through the Forge CLI, our lifecycle services kick in and configure the underlying environment. Then when a customer installs the app, it is associated by the app installation service with a product instance, such as Jira. So let's assume that this app registers an issue glance module. When a customer interacts with the issue, Jira asks Forge what apps are installed in this context, and Forge can respond appropriately so that Jira can load the right extensions. Now, let's say our app registered a custom UI resource. Those are loaded from the Forge CDN and rendered on the customer's browser. Performing an action in the app can invoke a Forge function via the function invocation service. And the responsibility of this service is to execute the relevant Forge function in an isolated context. Now, this app may also listen to product events, such as issue-created events for Jira. These also trigger the Forge function invocation. And Forge schedule triggers and Forge web triggers operate in a very similar way. Now, when the Forge function executes, it may call external API or interact with Atlassian products via our API. The simplified Forge authorization flows are handled by our OAuth 2 and managed authorization providers, with network requests passing through our outbound proxy, which manages egress defined in the app manifest. And lastly, the function may also access internal storage API, internal Forge API, such as storage. And below what I've just talked about is the Atlassian platform itself. So for all our internal services like compute, storage, networking, etc., Atlassian has a very powerful infrastructure platform, and we are able to leverage its reusable components to allow us to innovate at scale. The apps built on Forge are becoming increasingly large and complex. And with even larger apps around the corner, it's critical that we prove the platform is ready before a partner takes the chance of deploying a widely used app. We recently expanded our load testing harness and ran a simulation to test such a scenario. The test consists of multiple scenarios running in parallel, all applying load to Forge in different ways, installation, function invocation, UI interactions, etc. And by applying load to the entire platform simultaneously, we were able to monitor and stress the whole platform and its dependencies. Here you can see the results from the invocation service we talked about earlier. And you can see the two tests we ran as the two spikes on the graph. The first test simulated an extremely quick ramp up to see how quickly this service and its dependency could scale out. And the failed invocations in orange showed where a downstream dependency failed to scale as fast as we needed it to. Now, the service still scaled to many times the expected load, but these results allowed us to modify the scaling rules and go again. These types of tests allow us to test performance scenarios on our staging environment before we encounter anything similar in production. All right, so let's talk about product webhooks. Product webhooks are another service that nearly all apps rely on to detect real-time events and respond appropriately. When webhooks are delayed, it can create major challenges for app builders. Before we end today, I want to share one final story from the team who maintain webhooks in Jira. They recently celebrated some big wins that show how developer experience can really benefit when teams carve off extra time to focus on reliability. So for background, Jira sends a lot of webhooks. At this point, all Jira charts send over 1.6 billion webhooks per week. That's 230 million per day, 10 million per hour, and 2.5 thousand webhooks every second. And this number just keeps increasing. Just at the beginning of the calendar year, the total value was only 1 billion, and we are now 1.6. So this is the scale we need to support. Our performance SLO for webhooks is that 99% of webhooks should be delivered in less than 30 seconds. And frankly, we had a hard time achieving this goal. The problem is that Jira can generate a cascade of events in almost any instant. When a user removes a project with tens of thousands of issues, and each issue has thousands of comments and issue links, etc., it creates a thundering herd of events that land in our SQS as webhooks to be sent. And very often, most of these webhooks go to one major recipient, and that recipient almost always has trouble processing such a huge number of webhooks. And this seizes all the threads in the processing queues, and smaller recipients have to wait. Meanwhile, the recipient is having trouble processing the deluge of webhooks, and all requests keep going until they time out, which creates more processing delays. So to address this, we created 2 queues for webhooks instead of ones. A low priority queue, which is where all the webhooks for bulk and cascade event operations go, and a high priority queue, which is where all the other webhooks go. And we also created a concurrent limiter that will limit the number of simultaneous requests per tenant and webhook URL pair. This will help to avoid the problem of threads being hijacked by one recipient and help distribute traffic more fairly. Now, as a result, we now see significant fewer incidents and fewer alerts. More high priority webhooks are delivered on time. Now, other webhooks recipients will get their deliveries, even while another recipient is processing a cascade event because of the 2 queues. And it also means that only a small number of tenants per shard will be impacted when this happens, instead of all tenants on the shard. So we've reduced the blast radius. And importantly, webhooks reliability is now solidly in the healthy range at 99.95% SLI. Now, the number of webhooks doubles every 18 months, so we certainly have our work cut out for us. But that said, I feel incredibly confident in the team we have working on Forge, and we are in a great position to meet the increasing needs of our developers. There is much more to operating a business on Forge and the marketplace besides platform stability, but it is a critical piece. Now I'm going to turn it over to Joe, who has a slightly different perspective on how we think about platform readiness.
Hey everyone, thanks Colin. My name is Joe Clark, it's nice to see you all. I'm a product manager working on the Forge platform, and I'm here to talk to you today about how we're growing the operational maturity of Forge. So as Colin mentioned, we're getting more and more apps on Forge, and they're more complex and they're larger. And so more developers are depending on Forge to provide a stable and mature platform upon which to build a viable business. So we're working to ensure that Forge provides everything you need and meets your expectations for not only building, but also running, selling, and supporting apps that you depend on. Colin has already described how we're investing in improving the stability and reliability of the platform. And there are other areas where we're similarly striving to set and attain a higher bar. So I like to liken building a successful Forge app to running a successful restaurant. In the restaurant, there's a busy kitchen where the team is preparing ingredients, crafting recipes to create delicious food. And as part of Forge, we're working to give you those necessary ingredients in the form of extension points, product APIs, and platform capabilities that are needed to allow you to actually build your app and bring it to life. But just like a restaurant, you want to create an experience for customers that they're willing to pay for. So that means you need more than just tasty food. You need the other parts of the experience that surround it too. So in addition to the kitchen, you also need to present the meal in a way that's appealing to the customer. And so without stretching the analogy too far, what this means for a Forge app is that you need to also think about the important non-functional aspects of your app that customers care about. The app should be responsive and performant. It should have high availability and reliability. And you probably want to set up monitoring and automated testing and deployment pipelines so that you can minimize the impact of bugs and defects. And incidentally, I'm sure customers probably want their food to be free from bugs too. So let's assume you have all the right ingredients to create a delicious app. You have all the tools and techniques you need to present it in an appealing way, make customers want to purchase it. But of course, just eating a meal isn't the only thing you have to provide for customers at a restaurant. You're also operating a busy space with lots of customers. And at the end of the day, you also need to have a profitable business. So you need service staff, you need menus, you need to wash the dishes, you need to set the table, you need to manage your front of house, and you need to set prices appropriately so that you actually turn a profit. So for the Forge platform to help you succeed in this regard, we need to provide you with the right tools, documentation, and capabilities that let you operate and manage a profitable business. So this means we need to do things like provide clarity on operating costs, give you access to quality developer support, and ship changes to Forge in a predictable change management process. So as Forge matures as a platform, we've internalized that Forge needs to be a holistic solution across all 3 of these spaces. As part of this, we're looking at our ways of working, our processes, documentation, and roadmap to identify where we need to do things differently or where we need to do more to ensure that we are delivering this complete platform experience. So, of course, we've been working and talking for a long time about the technical capabilities and extension points that we're building in the kitchen for you. So let's take a quick look at 4 things we've been working on in the other 2 areas. Firstly, we understand that predictable costs are an important part of running a viable business. Forge has been available for free to all developers since its launch in 2021, and we've recently announced that Forge will continue to be free to use until December 2024. Beyond 2024, we are exploring ways in which we can charge developers for Forge proportional to the platform services or components used over and above a generous free tier. So I appreciate that by continuing to extend the free usage of Forge on a year-by-year basis, it's been great to spark innovation on the platform, but it has made it challenging to model the long-term costs of building on Forge. In our recent announcements, we have committed to incorporating feedback from marketplace partners and developers in our design of the future cost model, and we'll be providing at least 6 months notice before making any changes beyond the December 2024 date. I hope that by being open about our decision-making, providing plenty of advance notice, incorporating your feedback, we can give developers confidence that Forge will be a viable platform for large, complex commercial apps. Earlier this year, we introduced a new mechanism for developers to report critical bugs or incidents to Atlassian via our new consolidated developer support portal. Ensuring that Atlassian and app developers respond rapidly to emerging problems is critical in ensuring the best possible experience for our shared customers that minimizes customer impact and downtime when problems occur. This new incident reporting process moves this flow out of the developer community and into a system where Atlassian can monitor and report on trends, and sets up a framework where we can measure and understand important metrics like time to first response, time to acknowledgement of an incident, and time to resolution. While critical bugs and incidents can happen for any app on any platform, on Forge specifically, we understand that the developer must place greater trust in Atlassian to operate and manage that app during incidents and downtime. The introduction of a streamlined incident reporting process is a step we've taken to improve the maturity and operational readiness of our platform offering. In addition to improving our incident management, we're also working on improving our change management. In the past, we understand that Atlassian has been inconsistent in announcing timing and impact of changes that affect apps in our ecosystem. This is especially important for Forge, which is receiving lots of new features and updates all the time. So releases on the Forge platform will now follow a consistent release process where changes will flow through early access, preview, and then ultimately general availability. This new process reaffirms our intention to provide appropriate notice periods for breaking changes and provide opportunities for developers to provide feedback on changes in development, and sets expectations around what features are appropriate for what conditions, depending on the phase of the release. We are in the process of rolling out this pattern across all of the Atlassian ecosystem platform team across Connect and Forge. So please look out for more information on this process in the future as we start to use it. Our goal for Forge is to be a dependable platform where you can trust that your apps will operate reliably without outages or customer downtime caused by unannounced or unexpected changes. Speaking of changes, if you haven't seen it, a quick shout out to the Forge changelog, which you can find at developer.atlassian.com/platform/forge/changelog. And you can also see it up in the developer.atlassian.com header under the changelog link. Here you'll find information about all changes to Forge, including deprecation notices, announcements, critical bug fixes, and new, removed, or added features. It even has an RSS feed, so if you're old school, you can subscribe to updates as they are published. Finally, I'd like to talk about app performance. Like I said earlier, performance isn't something that you need to build out the functionality of your app, so it's not something that's in the kitchen. But it is certainly something that you need to ensure that the app provides a quality customer experience worth paying for. And without it, it can make certain functionality infeasible, or it can result in lots of wasted development time as you optimize around things that are slow. We want you to be able to rely on Forge to provide a performant baseline for you to build upon. And today there are some limitations that prevent Forge apps from being as fast and performant as they could be. The first one is that apps built with UIKit aren't architected to support highly interactive UIs. And UIKit is one of the 2 UI extensibility frameworks that's available in Forge. The other one is custom UI. And the reason why is because UIKit is server-side rendered. So user interactions that change the state of the UI introduce a round trip from the user's browser to the Forge runtime, which can be slow. The second one is that the Forge function runtime executes with a startup delay that needs to happen before your app's code can execute. And this happens because Forge apps run in a special isolated JavaScript VM that runs on top of AWS Lambda that enforces some of the security guarantees of the Forge platform, like governing access to API credentials and controlling egress to external domains. Each time your function executes, the isolate VM has to boot up and load your code. And while we've made some substantial improvements to the performance of this VM through snapshotting, the performance degradation that happens due to that startup is still non-zero, and it's definitely noticeable. So we are pretty deep into a project right now to replace this isolated VM layer with the native Node.js runtime provided by AWS. This project is pretty exciting for a number of reasons. Not only because we're able to preserve the security guarantees provided by the Forge runtime in a different way, but also because we anticipate that the new runtime will have some substantial performance benefits over the existing architecture. It's too early to share numbers, but we're optimistic that it will be a noticeable improvement. In addition to the performance gains, the new Forge runtime will address a long-standing issue where Forge is incompatible with a number of built-in Node libraries, and by extension, any third-party libraries that depend on those built-ins. So it's a substantial blocker to consumption of like third-party client APIs, for example. It also sets us up for a future where we can evaluate support for other languages on Forge, which is super exciting because we're no longer dependent on a JS-specific isolation technology. We're planning for the new runtime to be available in early access in the first half of 2023. So please look out for more information. The engineering team is super excited to get some real road testing of this feature and to talk about the engineering magic that's gone into building it. So that's all for me from now, and I'll hand over to Adam.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. Hi, everyone. I won't continue the kitchen analogy, but I will give a couple of important updates, starting with a couple of updates around OAuth for Forge apps. Firstly, the one everyone is waiting for, we are actively working on it, and that's removing the end user consent step for Forge apps. Unfortunately, it's not just as simple as hiding a screen. There's some pretty substantial changes we're making under the hood or under the ocean and on the iceberg in Colin's terminology, but it remains sort of one of our top priorities, and we'll get that out as soon as we can, planning for next quarter. Secondly, around OAuth, we're opening up Forge access for different customer types in Jira Service Manager. So currently, to interact with a Forge app, you need to be an Atlassian user with a license for JSM in this case. And that's obviously quite limiting, especially for the JSM customer portal, which is used by a range of different user types, anonymous users, customer accounts, and Atlassian users without JSM licenses. So we'll be progressively sort of rolling out support to all those user types over the next quarter. And the best place to stay tuned for updates on that is the Forge ticket, which is Forge 189. And then changing tack, I've got an exciting update on UIKit, which isn't something we've talked about in recent webinars. So exciting to get back to UIKit. And we are releasing a client-side version of UIKit, or we've just gone into EAP at the moment. And so immediately, sort of this solves for that sluggish interactivity problem that Joe just mentioned, where we're not making a round trip to the Lambda every time anymore, which is cool. But we've also given it a big facelift, adding things like styling and layout, which will help you build really awesome looking apps as well. And the great thing is that the components themselves are still natively rendered in the Atlassian products, which is going to be really important when it comes to things like Forge Mobile in the future. And so just give you a quick sneak of what that looks like, and what you're seeing now is a client-side UIKit app. It looks mostly like a traditional UIKit app, except it's got a select, which isn't part of a form. It's just using the on-change handler, and then a basic demo of a counter, which isn't that mind-blowing, but if you've ever used UIKit before, you'll notice that the interactivity and snappiness is a big improvement. Again, not exactly mind-blowing, but a big improvement is layout. So we now have horizontal and vertical layout available in UIKit. You can even use flex properties if you need more control. Here you can see the on-change handlers again for the form components working in real time. And another bonus is you get access to the custom UI bridge, which we now have to call the Forge bridge, to create product flags, call product APIs directly from the front end, etc. And then another cool thing we've added is this thing called the frame component, which actually lets you drop in custom UI apps into your UIKit apps. So even with all the flexibility we've added, if you still need a bit more, so charting in this example, we don't have components for charts. You can just drop in a custom UI app to fill that gap. And then just one more cool example. We've got the UIKit component for displaying code on the left, and we have a custom UI app on the right for editing code. And you can see the right-hand side updates the left-hand side in real time using the Forge bridge, actually using the events API. So we think there's lots of cool things that can be done here. We're really excited about it. Still early days in the EAP. Stay tuned for when we go and open it up to preview in the first half of next year. That's it from me, and I'll pass over to Jakob.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, I'm also pretty excited about client-side UIKit. We'll use it in GRForge modules. Hello, my name is Jakub, and I will show you an update about GRForge modules. In the last quarter, we have delivered 9 modules, and we work on 5. And in this quarter, you can go. Yeah, we delivered 2. We continue to work on 3, and we have started work on jQuery functions and Forge custom fields general availability release. With background scripts, you can create more interactive apps for dashboards and issue view, cache data, and read the events, things like this. Thanks to configure and get started page, you can improve your app installation experience, which is also great. We continue to work on workflows. Validators and conditions have been released. We are still working on post functions. When it comes to the inline edit on the issue view, we have discovered lots of corner cases. We have a long list of improvements from internal teams, so it will take a bit longer, but we want to have it sooner or later. The good news about the jQuery functions is that they are coming. We'll have early access in next quarter, and the user experience will be the same as for native functions. Forge custom fields general availability release. We are going to improve the monitoring. We will fix the most important bugs and add display conditions to global issue create. Many Forge custom fields apps have been already created, but we'll still continue to invest in Forge custom fields. We are also pretty excited about UI modifications general availability release. We plan to announce it before the Christmas. We have optimized and performance, and we are ready to support enterprise scale. We also have released support for the most popular fields. And there are still many not covered use cases, so feel free to add more apps for UI modifications. And next quarter, we'll focus on multi-UI modifications from multi-apps in one context, and many other features. You can view them all in the Forge projects, thanks to the component UI modification component. And in long term, we plan to add support for issue view and transition view. When it comes to display conditions, we will not work on them in the next quarter. We have decided to focus more on UI modifications and Forge custom fields. We plan to have more secure and more powerful backend implementation, but it's moved further. The good news about Forge custom fields is that support for 10-minute project is coming, and we plan to improve the loading time. And in long term, we'll add support for Forge custom fields to additional views. Yeah, and that is it. Over to Aditi.
Thanks, Jakub. So I have two exciting announcements for you all today. Keeping on the theme of Jira extensibility, soon we'll be giving you a new way to extend Jira, and that is on mobile. So we want to give you the ability to reach out to customers. Oh, sorry, can we go to the next slide? We want to give you the ability to reach out to customers wherever they work, whether that be at their desks or on the go. And the best part is that you don't need to know any mobile development to do this. All you need to do is build your UIKit apps the way you would. And we've implemented native rendering support for selected extension points and UIKit components. At the moment, we have 2 extension points that are supported. This is the issue glance and issue activity extension points on Jira, and also 11 of the most commonly used UIKit components, which includes text, image, and table. We have a lot more on the way. The team is hard at work building some more of these UIKit components and extension points. So if you're interested in giving this a go, keep an eye out in early 2023, in the first few months, for an early access program. We'll be announcing it on the community, so yeah, stay tuned. Another really exciting announcement is multi-user app ownership. We recognize that apps are owned by a single Atlassian account, and this can make it a bit difficult to work in teams and to work collaboratively on an app, which is why we're excited to announce this will be coming to you in early 2023 as well. This is a multi-stage project, and we have a lot planned for this to make it easier to collaborate on Forge apps. In the first milestone, we'll be allowing you to add, remove, and list contributors through Forge's CLI. These contributors can then make changes to the app, deploy, and install it through the CLI as well, and of course also manage it through the developer console. We're also currently exploring the ability to work concurrently on Forge through the ability to manage multiple development environments. This will be coming a little bit later once we've released the early access program for the ability to add, remove, and list contributors. So to show you some of the things we're working on, the first milestone will be done through the CLI. However, we acknowledge that sometimes the developer console and having that user interface is a little bit easier. And we do want to give you that additional flexibility and control in future milestones by adding more functionality to give you the ability to do that. This is coming in early 2023. There is going to be an early access program for that core functionality in the CLI. So stay tuned for this as well. Now I'll hand it over to Julia.
Hey everyone, just want to give you a very brief update on the OAuth Scopes project and another project we haven't talked about just as yet, which is called Access Narrowing. So starting with the OAuth Scope update, for those that haven't listened to the last Forge webinar where I touched on this already. So this is really the follow-up for our granular scopes rollout and the pause of the rollout. We really took the time since the last Forge webinar to deep dive into past research, gap analysis, really looking into revalidating the problem statement. And then we spent some time with some of you, both in focus groups, but also one-on-one interviews to identify what are the expectations with regards to the new scopes, what were the gaps, what's the major pain point. Therefore, by the way, great to hear, I guess, for you, all of you from Adam about the end user consent, which will kick in before our new scopes come out. So it comes nicely together next year. At this stage, we're aiming to finish our so-called explore phase before Christmas. So we have finished our research phase now. We put 2 scope proposals in front of some partners design concepts to comment on and to give us feedback upon. We put some consent screens in front of customers to validate, some with more details around scopes, one with less, to really find that sweet spot, how much information should we give and how much information is maybe too much and may be a little bit scary, and what the app can access. So we're really aiming to settle on the final approved scope list by before Christmas, and then we can start to build them next year. Our early access program starts for partners in May. We will test the scopes with internal Atlassian developers first, though. So hopefully we get some good feedback before we put that in front of you. So yeah, watch that space. Hopefully next Forge webinar, I can give you an update on the first findings. The next slide is about a project we call access narrowing. This is more really something for our shared customers. Customers moving to cloud have told us that they're pretty worried about the security of their data, in particular data egress, and how can they secure data that is pretty sensitive, like a merchant acquisition data, something like that. So with access narrowing, we enable admins to really take control over what an app can access, and we give them the ability to restrict app access to that sensitive data. And how we do that is that in Admin Hub, they will be able to define app policies, and within a policy, say, to stick to that example for a merchant acquisition space in Confluence, they define that M&A app policy, select those specific Confluence spaces they're worried about, and then they can block an app's access to that particular data. So it's really about blocking app access to data rather than installation control. So the app will still be installed, it will be still running in other spaces and projects. Initially, we're aiming at an EAP July next year with a very simple allow block all apps in a specific space or project. And over time, we're aiming at making this a bit more granular. So rather than block or allow all apps in a specific space, we would show all apps installed in that space, and then an admin can selectively block those apps they deem to be more risky than others. So that's really an exciting project that our customers have been waiting for. It's been taking a while to get where we are at the moment. So really watch that space. I'm happy to give you more updates at the next webinar as well as we progress with the build. And yeah, with that, hand over to Ben, who will talk a little bit more about OAuth 2 for Connect.
Thanks, Julia. Hi, my name is Ben McCoy. I'm an engineering manager on Ecosystem Platform, and I'm here to talk to you about OAuth 2.0 for Connect on Forge. So let's begin with a quick refresher on Connect on Forge. As the title suggests, this feature is available for Connect on Forge apps. It's worth noting up front that you will not be able to add OAuth 2.0 to your regular or classic Connect app. We first introduced Connect on Forge at Dev Day 21, then followed up later in the year with a blog post where we introduced the states of migration. Connect on Forge provides backward compatibility for Connect modules and features on Forge, and is intended as an optional incremental migration pathway for Connect to Forge. The way you access Connect on Forge is by translating your descriptor into a Forge manifest with a matching Connect key. Next slide, please. These steps are detailed in a developer.atlassian.com tutorial. As called out in the banner at the top of the tutorial, there are still a number of known limitations and issues with Connect on Forge, and with the other states that we're also addressing. In the last 12 months or so, a number of factors have meant we've had little opportunity to tackle Connect on Forge limitations. and give it our official seal of approval. Nevertheless, some apps are still making use of Connect on Forge today. Like other Connect on Forge features, this feature offers a pathway, in this case from JWT authentication to OAuth 2.0. It's worth noting at this point that the latest versions of both Atlassian Connect frameworks, Atlassian Connect Express or ACE, and Atlassian Connect Spring Boot support OAuth 2.0 for Connect on Forge apps. Okay, to sum it up, Connect on Forge apps will be able to use OAuth 2.0 to authenticate with Atlassian services as themselves. Okay, so what do we mean by this? This is for Connect on Forge apps, not classic Connect apps, as I mentioned before. Authenticating with Atlassian services means Jira, Confluence, or Atlassian platform APIs. As themselves, this feature involves the app authenticating as itself via the client credentials grant flow. It does not include user impersonation, such as the authorization code grant flow or the JWT profile extension. That covers the question of what, but how about why? One of the most compelling reasons for us is OAuth 2.0 is the industry standard. At the time Connect was introduced, OAuth 2.0 didn't exist yet, and JWT was the best option available. Now OAuth 2.0 has become the industry standard. Multiple authentication methods across different APIs make for a confusing introduction to building Atlassian apps for developers. In other words, we want to focus on one standard so we can make new features available more quickly for everyone. In the long run, we think OAuth 2.0 will be easier for new developers and make our authentication stack more consistent. From a scale perspective, consolidating onto the Atlassian standard way of authenticating apps and integrations means new Atlassian APIs become available to Connect on Forge apps, meaning new Atlassian APIs will be built using OAuth 2.0. Beyond just unlocking more product data and operations, this is a stepping stone to allow Connect on Forge apps to interact with Forge storage and compute into the future. Okay, who is this for? If you're already using Connect on Forge for your production app or plan to use it, then you can begin adopting OAuth 2.0. We're aware this is not for most developers right now, at least until a few more of the Connect on Forge limitations are addressed, such as reflecting module updates in install sites. Even so, you may like to try this feature out in a test version of your app to get a feel for how it works or look for ways that it could be improved to better fit the needs of your app. Okay, that's all from me, and I'll hand over to Karen for Q&A.
Thanks, Ben. So that's it for our roadmap presentation, and we will move on to Q&A. We've had a couple of questions come in so far, but please keep them coming if you have a question for our panelists. Our first question, Aditi, if you wouldn't mind turning your camera on, this one will be for you. Will Android and iPhone screens only work if you're using custom UI? This one's from Paul Clark.
Okay, thanks, Paul. So currently our plans for mobile support for Forge apps is to focus on UIKit components. This means that currently we will not be building support for custom UI on mobile. And the reason we've made this decision, really there's two parts. One of them is we want to make it easier for you to build beautiful experiences on mobile. And doing so via UIKit means that we can take on most of the effort and make it a lot easier and very less effort for you. And the other part is that when we rent the components natively in mobile, it's also just a really great experience. It looks like it's part of the product and it's a great experience for our users. With that being said, at the moment, it's a no for custom UI, but perhaps in the future, we may revisit that decision. So yeah, if you have any thoughts about that, of course, feel free to reach out to any of us. But yeah.
Awesome. I'll keep you here because the next question will be for you as well. This one comes from Aaron. Regarding multi-user app ownership, will additional collaborators have the same permissions as the original owner?
Okay, yeah, so I want to start off by saying that we are completely aware that having multiple different layers of permissions and the ability to transfer those permissions and have different roles for each of those contributors is something that a lot of you do today and something that you would want on Forge. So it is something that we are actively exploring. However, with that being said, for the first milestone, because we do want to get this out to you as soon as possible so that you can try it out through our early access program. In the first milestone in the early access program that we'll be releasing early next year, all contributors will have the same permissions.
Awesome, thank you. Adam, if you are up next. So this question comes from Wolfgang. Is there a connection between shipping Node.js and removing user-specific auth?
Hey, Wolfgang. Good question, but no, there's sort of no dependency there. The user auth is more around identity and being able to call APIs, as user, as you'd expect, which is pretty separate to the runtime. So there's no sort of dependency on those. They'll be sort of released independently.
Awesome. And actually, I think I have one more that falls into your area as well. This one also comes from Wolfgang, who is looking forward to on-change in UIKit. But are there any concerns when it comes to backwards compatibility with existing UIKit apps, or is that something that we're kind of thinking about?
Yeah, there are some small changes with the components if you're moving from classic UIKit to client-side UIKit, but they are reasonably small. Some of the bigger changes are actually around, say, how you call product APIs, because not everything's happening on the server anymore. So whereas in UIKit now, you could just call product APIs directly from your app, you now need to do that via a resolver like you do in custom UI, and same for Forge storage as well. So yeah, there's a little bit of sort of changes to the architecture of your app that you'll need to make, but the component changes are quite small.
Awesome, thank you. And just a quick note, if you asked a question and you're not seeing your question appear in Q&A, do not worry. We have recorded your name and your question. Some of these just need to follow up with teams that are not represented on this call. So we'll do our research and we'll get back to you. Up next, I think, Jakob, would you like to take this one? This question comes from Julian Wolf. Do we currently have any plans to support Forge custom fields in team managed projects?
Yeah, it's coming. We are at, let's say, internal testing stage. I don't have a timeline for now, but definitely it is something which we want to support. It's on the way.
Awesome. I'll give it just one more minute for our team to go through the questions that are coming in, or for anyone who's on the call to get their last minute question in. We did have a few come in that we will need to research to answer. So if we have not answered your question, do not worry. Thank you again so much to all of our panelists. This was our last Forge Roadmap webinar for 2022, but we will be back in the new year with more updates for you. So hopefully you get to spend some time with friends and family at the end of the year, and we will see you back in probably February. All right, thanks everyone. Take care.